Goes up and we can give him a break.
Okay, so I have about an hour and a half.
15 minutes and
I know we went too long.
I know.
To say something about these, the two biggest questions of life, human life: who am I, and how shall I live? So obviously that's quite a short time to cover a very big subject. So I'll do my best to share what I've come to in my own experience, and see where we go. But I also just want to emphasize, in terms of everything we're covering this weekend, we're only going to be able to scratch the surface. Yeah, so this is not just it's not just a meditation retreat. It's not just a spiritual retreat, because we're all very actively involved in different projects and trying to improve things in this crazy world. So we also want to look at the cultural dimensions and some philosophical dimensions of creating a new culture. So we're going to hit on a lot of different areas, and there's a lot more we could all go into in depth about everything. I just want everyone to be aware of that. So who am I, how shall I live? You know, we could do a retreat on this for a month and still not be finished. I mean, one would never finish, really. It's endless. So I just want to emphasize, we're just going to be scratching the surface of a lot of different themes here. Okay? So that said, who am I and who am I and why am I here? As I said, they're the two biggest questions, I think, that any human being can ask themselves. If you can come up with a bigger one, I'll be interested to find out what you think it is. So these are obviously profound questions, mystical questions, one could say, spiritual questions, and also become philosophical questions. But the way I want to go into this is really from the point of view of our direct experience, because ultimately that's the only way we can know anything. Otherwise we're just picking up some conceptual understanding or philosophy and imposing it on our experience. So as Cynthia said, I am going to be presenting a perspective, a way to see the human experience, especially at this very tipping point moment in our evolutionary history as human beings. But I really want the essence of this to really be about our direct experience right here and now. Why is this important? Because I'm sure you'd all agree we're living at a time of great crisis and also potentially great opportunity. And what's imperative for those of us who do actually care about the future and about where we're going as a human race is to find a passion and a purpose that transcends our own personal, individual lives. Okay? And also through that discovery to actually find a way to come together that transcends our individual personal lives, transcends and includes. Of course that's a big dimension of who we are. But as I'm sure you're all aware, part of the big challenge of our times is we're living in the age of the individual. We have thrown out all the religious traditions, what we have, maybe our parents haven't, and our grandparents haven't. But a lot of the traditional structures, moral structures, spiritual structures, social structures that used to hold human beings together in a higher purpose and a higher meaning for human life, we've pretty much thrown them out for good reasons, because they became very limiting and a lot of it just didn't make sense anymore. Like God created the universe in 6 days. I don't know about that. Maybe that's not true anymore, for example. So a lot of the mythic traditions from the past have been discarded. And you know, we've entered into a period of great of modernism, postmodernism, great expansion in many fields, but largely the realm of what we could call the sacred, or higher context of being human beings, and also a higher and deeper context in which we come together. This has largely been lost. And many of us have been, through our lives, and are trying to find that again, as I'm sure many of you have. I know many of you have. But the challenge is, normally the spiritual path these days normally still ends up being a personal, inner journey. I have my spiritual path. These are my convictions, my beliefs. I'm doing these practices. This is my path. You have yours. And if we share the same spiritual path, obviously we would have some resonance. But when we think of the word spiritual or spirit, or even mysticism, it usually has the connotation of being some inner journey, which really I can't ever really explain to you, or you would never really be able to understand. So it's all to do with the deep privacy of my interior and the deep privacy of your interior. Okay? That's also traditionally how it's tended to be. So basically what I'm going to be sharing here is a challenge to that, which is a new and I believe very relevant, culturally relevant perspective on who we actually are in the deepest sense, and what that actually means individually and collectively. Okay. Because I think it's very clear that this is something that we need to find and discover. We need to discover a deeper spiritual, philosophical, moral context in which to come together. And that means we need to transcend the cult of the individual. Basically, the most important thing that exists is me, my desires, my fears, my truth, what's good for me. Right? I'm sure a lot of you recognise that's kind of the, even for us more progressive types, that's a big part of the challenge we're up against. Okay? So, first question, who am I? Well, actually, no, one other thing I wanted to mention at the beginning was that Einstein quote that was mentioned in the movie yesterday, which I've always loved that quote, where he says, we cannot solve our problems from the same level of consciousness at which we're creating them. So, what does that really mean? It means that, as Cynthia asked everyone in the last question, we all have to be interested in change. Because if we try and fix things and improve things and create more sustainable solutions and transition movements, etc., from the same level of consciousness that we're already embedded in, I think, as I'm sure some of you have begun to find, you don't end up actually changing very much. You can move the furniture around and have some more sustainable furniture, and maybe it looks better and it kind of works better and it's a bit more holistic and harmonious. But you've still got a bunch of egos who are fundamentally convinced that they're all separate, unique individuals, going like this in the end. You know, they might get on all harmoniously, but people's fundamental allegiance is still me as being a separate individual, and my needs and my fears, and that's what's important. So a lot of these efforts, you know, don't ultimately add up to much and aren't going to take us further unless we also recognise that we need an inner transition here, an inner transition. We need to evolve our consciousness to a higher level, and that doesn't just mean our individual experience, but that means collectively. So it's the evolution of consciousness and culture. And by culture, we're not meaning, well, we might get around to that, but we're not meaning creating new monuments or doing art and writing novels about this, but some of us might be inspired to do that. But it's really about relationship. Culture is really the world of human relationship and the shared values. Okay? So that's what we're really meaning when we're talking about the creation of a new culture. It's a collective or we space, transforming that. Okay. So Einstein said we have to evolve our level of consciousness, and of course many great teachers, mystics, philosophers throughout history have said the same thing. And the perennial wisdom that all the great masters, teachers, mystics throughout the ages, the perennial message that they all come back to share, if you boil it down, they might all have their different language, their different way they express it. If you boil it down, the fundamental message is, hey everybody, we're all one. Okay? We're all one. Whether you're a Sufi, whether you're a Christian, whether it was Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, they were coming back, everybody saying, hey, wake up everyone. This whole idea that you are a separate, unique individual just living inside your skin in your own personal world, it's not really true. It's not really what the ultimate truth is. So, I know everyone's heard that before, but what does it really mean? That's what we're really going to go into in this weekend. What does it really mean? And also, what does it mean to begin to experience that? So, the perennial truth, if you like, the perennial mystical truth is that we're all one. So that means that right here and now, in this room, there's only one of us sitting here. And at the same time, there's many of us. So, a big part of the ever fascinating and intriguing mystery of what it means to be a human being who is waking up to the truth is waking up to this truth that there is only one. And if we wake up to that together, we start to recognize that whatever it is that's looking through my eyes and looking through your eyes, if we just stay with the pure conscious awareness of I am, there's only one of us here. As soon as I say, well, I am Pete, I am English, you are Portuguese, I have this personal history, I'm a saint, I'm a victim, I'm whatever, then of course, then what comes in is the conviction of separation. But if we're just looking at the radiance and the emanation of pure consciousness, just the fact that we are all aware that we are alive, just that, right? Is there any difference between us? In terms of the energy and intelligence that is animating us and animating our form right now, is there any difference? I don't think so. So, on the most primordial, fundamental level of just pure being, and there's only one of us here. There's only one consciousness that's animating these many forms. And of course, if you expand that out, there's one consciousness that's animating everything, that is everything. Right? So, as we started to experience in the meditation this morning, which was actually very deep meditation, I hope everyone began to experience this sense of pure being. When it doesn't necessarily mean your mind has to disappear or anything actually has to change in your experience. But it's literally the difference between being focused on identifying with the objects of consciousness, thought, feeling, emotion, sensation, this is me, and then just letting go of the identification. And we start to experience an expansion of awareness, an expansion of consciousness. And maybe you are all aware of experiencing just a profound peace and lightness of being. Did anyone experience any of that? Any peace, lightness of being? Okay, mass and maintenance?
Or just even a little freedom from your mind.
Yeah, maybe the mind is, maybe the mind instead of being, so this is the mind, usually is right here, blah 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 blah. It just started to, there's a little bit more distance. Maybe it's still going blah 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 blah. You're kind of realizing, oh, well, I'm also all this here, space. So if we did a meditation retreat together, which would be great, please. I lead meditations retreats here every month, and it's always a beautiful and very powerful experience. Because the more, if you're in silence for a whole weekend or more, and you just decide, well, I'm not actually going to worry about my crazy mind and what it's saying. I'm just going to leave it alone. Sooner or later, eventually, it just starts to fall away from the seat of consciousness. And you start to recognize, well, the mind is just a machine, really, that produces thoughts, often compulsively. I don't have any control over it. But it's not who I am, because I'm aware of it. So the deeper we fall into that place of pure consciousness, the more we experience what we could call being, just pure being, which is what is represented by the blue area on the model there. And in pure being, when we let go of everything, the idea is just to let go of everything. Don't try to change anything. As I said, no relationship to the contents of consciousness. So the contents of consciousness includes the whole world, all of the crazy people in it and all the lovely people in it, everything in the outer universe, and it also includes all the objects in consciousness, which is thought, sensation, feeling, everything. So when we either spontaneously or through a process of meditation experience freedom from all the objects in consciousness, we start to experience consciousness itself. Or we could say we start to experience spirit itself. I prefer to use the word consciousness because spirit, a lot of people tend to have a lot of ideas when they think of the word spirit, and you could also call it God, but people tend to have even more ideas when you use the word God. So consciousness is a very neutral kind of term, but what it's really pointing to is the mystery that is underlying everything and is ultimately everything. Okay. So, is everyone with me? So, muscle movement. So, if we want to know the answer to the question, who am I? Who am I really? You know, not just this apparent separate individual who was born at a certain time, has had a certain bunch of experiences, has a certain self-image and a bunch of ideas about himself or herself and the world, was brought up in a particular culture and has inherited certain cultural tendencies, etc. All of that's part of who we are, no doubt. That's all part of who we are, and that's also why we're so fascinating in our infinite differences. That's part of who we are. But if we want to know who we really are at the deepest level, we want to discover this ground, this ground of being. When you discover that ground of being, and I'm sure some of you, you've had experiences of discovering this, whether it's been very profound or just to some degree. People often experience this when they spend time in nature, when you're doing something you love, when you just let go. And you start to experience freedom. Freedom from the mind, freedom from history, freedom from thought, freedom from anxiety, freedom from everything. And in that freedom, there's a sense of infinite potential, because one isn't holding on to anything. And there's also the experience of freedom from the world. Freedom from the world and all the endless